He believed that those who fled were possible suspects. He was not targeting minorities. In fact, he also detained a white female who you do not see on the video.
That is Eric Casebolt's lawyer. Casebolt, he is that McKinney, Texas police officer who just resigned yesterday. As a matter of fact, the news, in fact, broke during our show. Now, you've all probably seen this video. He was caught on tape throwing down this teenage girl and waving his gun around after a pool party turned into a melee. Now, several civil rights organizations demanding an investigation by the Department of Justice. This isn't the first time Casebolt's been in trouble. He was sued back in 2008 by a black man who says he was racially profiled by him and used excessive force during his arrest. That case eventually dismissed. All right, let's bring in a new face to the panel here. John D'Alessandro, he is a partner at the Quinn Law Firm. He serves as counsel to New York City Sergeants Benevolent Association as well as numerous police unions. And he's a former law enforcement officer yourself. That's right. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. All right, before I get into the civil suits and everything else, we saw about a minute of that video that came at the end. Apparently there was 9 minutes before that we didn't see, and there was other eyewitness accounts. And Larry, if we could play that clip of that father that was there at the scene when the police came. Let's take a listen to what his vantage point of this was.
People from outside the community started coming. Once they couldn't get access to the pool, that's the jumping over the fence, that's the cursing out the security guard, and then the fights broke out, and then that's what the police called. So this perception that my community and people that were living there said, oh, it's a black party, let's call the police, we don't want black kids in our pool, is totally false.
Okay. Now, you know, John, I think to save a lot of time, I haven't heard anybody, law enforcement or otherwise, who thinks that the officer was anything but an idiot when he decided to take his gun out and start waving it around here. You can even see the other cops putting his hand on his shoulder, like, put it away. Moreover, he probably went overboard when it related to that 14, 15-year-old girl that he had her face down in the dirt and everything else. He clearly overreacted. But my question is, what is the fair expectation for the public when a 911 call comes in and says, people are pouring over the fence here, you got people calling in saying there are fights and everything else. When they come on the scene, what's the distinction between profiling, separating blacks and whites at the pool versus responding to a call and saying black youths are climbing over the fence here, they're having a fight inside a private pool area? Where's that line for what the public should have an expectation of police in a real-time event to be able to manage the situation so it doesn't escalate even further?
Well, I mean, do we know that call was, you know?
We knew numerous phone calls were made to 911 and that they were said that black youths were climbing over fences. There was fights in the pool. The security guard who tried to dismiss, they harassing them or whatever else, and they called it in. And we knew several, and they identified them as black youths, and maybe other words, but that's how they were identified when the calls came in.
But what we don't know is if that information had anything to do with the decisions that officer made. You know, we see a snapshot in time, and most snapshots only show you a small picture, and it shows you from one perspective. We don't know what that officer heard on his way to that call, the other things that were put over the radio. We don't know what he saw when he got there that caused him to react in the way he did.
We do know why he pulled the gun, that when he was holding the girl face down, we'll probably get to the clip. At that point, a couple of people came around. We don't know what they said or whatever else. But nobody believes, it's a pool party, people in bathing suits, that anyone was armed. He took the gun out and he started waving at him. Right here, in fact, you'll see the exchange which precipitates. So there he goes. You can hear him yelling. Those guys come, and right there he goes for his gun. And then you can see the other officers, you know, trying to calm down the situation.
That's a perspective. But I just would point out, the person that came charging up to him wasn't in a bathing suit. He was in street clothes, and that officer doesn't know what that person's intentions are. Now, it looks like an overreaction, but we don't know what he saw before. We don't know what he saw after. I would just caution that.
But why is he doing that? Even forget the race, just from an excessive force standpoint, why is he beating this girl up?
Well, look, I don't know.
No, but what I didn't want to do is, John, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot to try and be this guy's counsel. What I was trying to do was to get a perspective also from an officer where you're coming on a situation. This much we know. These cops weren't joyriding, looking to hassle people. They were called to the scene. They responded to the scene. You heard eyewitness accounts saying that it was a fluid scene where there was obviously a lot of tension going on, and for 9 minutes they tried to disband the scene, and people were intentionally not breaking it up. I think we can say there was no reaction, but what should the legal expectation be when police come upon a scene here, and they're obviously trying to get control of the situation, and at least the respondents weren't listening to them when they did it? What should the public, especially with all these incidents now caught on camera for the last year, what should the public's expectation be?
I don't. Should they expect that he said, okay, never mind, we'll leave? They can't leave. See, that's the problem. The police can't leave. Police get called because these folks can't manage their own problem. So they're asking the police to come and manage it for them. The police don't have the luxury of leaving. They have to get the situation under control. And sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes they overreact. That looks like an overreaction. It may very well be an overreaction. I don't think any of us have enough information at this point in time to say whether it is, because we don't have all of the 8 minutes.
Well, the McKinney Police Department seemed pretty clear to distance themselves from his actions. He resigned as recently as last night here. But Mayo, I had an officer here who was on the set with me last night. And my perspective is so much of what we've seen in so many different places is exasperated when youth, primarily, and I'm not condoning what he did around us, you know I'm not, but cop says to me, shut up and get against the wall. I'm getting against the wall. Well, they're saying go bleep yourself or whatever else in many cases, and the respect issue on both sides escalates this situation where thankfully it didn't get tragic in this case, but it gets overboard. Is that a big part of it? You've been on both sides of this.
It's a huge part of it, and you're right on point, because the officer shouldn't get there and immediately say, shut up. The first thing you do is you start to use verbal judo. You try to disarm people. You try to calm the situation. And if you look, there's a clip of this officer getting there. He runs up. Nobody's even there. He drops and does a barrel roll and then comes up. And there was really no apparent reason for him to do that. Nobody else within arm's reach, or even you could even see in the video. So this officer very well may not be prepared to handle a circumstance like this.
By the way, I don't think it was a judo roll. I think it was just spastic and he fell, but all right.
But you do need officers who are prepared to deal with difficult situations, and that's why you need the best.
But what's the expectation of the public in terms of a police officer or officers? And you heard a lot of eyewitness accounts and also other officers. They tried for a while to say, listen, stand down, stand to the side here, we're going to do some questioning. And they said no, they were taunting the officers and everything else.
Well, you can't do that, and if the police are asking you and they're giving you a lawful request, then the police have a right to come in and to ask you to disperse, and if you don't, then they can make an arrest. But here you're looking at a 14, some people say 15-year-old girl, clearly a kid when you see her in a bathing suit, so no weapons that she has on her unless she's hiding something in a bikini. She doesn't need to be taken from the grass and thrown down onto the concrete.
With that.
And that has nothing to do with what her race is. It doesn't make a bit of difference. The conduct is the conduct. That's what's in question here. So when you look at the way he's handling her, it wasn't necessary. She didn't put up a struggle. He was not in a position where he couldn't control her.
We've talked before, every black male I've had on this program with an attorney, cop, or whatever, they've all talked about having to talk with their son or even daughter in a pullover. Does that extend to also how they talk to cops when they're not in the car?
And, yeah, absolutely, but it's not limited to black people either.
No, I know
if
it's not, but you get my point,
friends,
because we've seen the percentages, unarmed youth that get shot of color versus other,
Absolutely.
et cetera. But does it also extend to, the cop says this, do it and later on
it
do
extends
something
to
else
how
instead
you
of...
respond to police, how you respond to your teachers, how you respond to adults and other people on the street. But I'll tell you this, I bet you there's not one police officer who has children who doesn't have that talk also, and if you suggest otherwise, you're disingenuous.
You want expectations. I mean, we've all had this. You know, we raised our kids. They were in high school. They used to have parties at houses. Cops used to come. It was like there's a big thing in every neighborhood. The expectation is certainly what we experienced. The police show up. They knock on a door. A few kids jump out the window. They run down. No one's chasing them and throwing them down on the floor. The expectations is as you say, verbal judo, get somebody, pull somebody aside, listen, do me a favor, tell your friends. That's the expectation.
Yeah.
Well, Rich, but, you know, everybody has to take responsibility also. A lot of the problems that we don't address in society are confronted, these police officers confront. Mental illness, you know, there's no money for that, but they expect a whole bunch of police officers to run up and deal with the guy in the street. I mean, when you look at this film, it's obviously
Heroin addicts, well,
disturbing.
now they're
Everybody.
asking
And then you ask a couple of police officers, you deal with it. It's, you know, everybody has to take a
All
little
right, we're
responsibility.
going to talk about another issue on this one. Stay with me, John. When we come back on the other side of the break here, unintended consequences potentially, and we go to Baltimore for that. Criminals are finding a police force that in a lot of cases, by the police-owned admission, are standing down. That after maybe how the prosecutor's office decided to handle the Freddie Gray case here. So you'll be amazed at what you're hearing from certain officers, and we're going to talk about where this goes from here. Stay with us.